Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome Editor Viks Patel, who joins us to talk about their work on the Sympathizer. Viks will talk us through the editing process on episodes 1, 2, and 5 of the show. Please be warned that there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Viks. Hi Viks, thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
We're here to talk about the Sympathizer, which has recently wrapped on HBO. I personally love the series. I still think HBO are sort of kings at what they do, and especially with TV dramas. And yeah, I really enjoyed the series. What about yourself? How have you found the reception to the show?
Yeah, I think, I've had several folks reach out telling, saying how much they enjoyed the series, how much they enjoyed the filmmaking, questions about my collaboration with Director Park. So I think it's been positive. Now, I'm not privy to numbers, etc. But I think it's a piece of art. It's intellectual, it's dense, so it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I think, judging by the premiere and kind of the noise of surrounding it, I would imagine it was received well.
Yeah, I think as a show itself, I read a lot about stuff online, and I think sometimes it feels like a bit of a echo chamber in terms of you read a lot of good stuff or you just read a lot of bad stuff on shows in general. It depends on like what your algorithm sometimes spits out on stuff like Facebook, Twitter, and all that, which can then ruin your perception of how you enjoy the show in a way. Because there might be a lot of stuff that you disagree with or a lot of stuff you agree with. But I think with the show itself, there's a lot of I think the performances are so strong in it that's probably I would say it would be my like top five of things that I've seen this year as well.
Yeah, and that's testament to Poir, who plays the captain. I mean, he is the captain of the series. I mean, he literally is holding all 7 episodes together. Granted, you've got a star in Robert Downey Jr. playing five characters, four main characters, but five characters. He's a small part, really, when you think about it. It's the captain's story, and he's probably in 95% of the scenes. And he's brilliant. I mean, he's an Australian Vietnamese actor, had to put on the American accent, had to kind of perfect his Vietnamese, and he had to carry the whole show. And he's got such an incredible look. It's so charismatic, such a great look. Gave wonderful, wonderful performances too. So it was a pleasure to, put the scenes together that he really owned. And he came in with a plan and a strong point of view too.
I think it's crazy as well, like how much is put on like an actor to carry a show as well. Whilst you do have your supporting actors, but if you're in it for so much of it, and then if you're in for 95% of it, then your shooting days as well. The amount of shooting days that you have to do, it'll probably be considerably a lot more than others. So then you always have to sort of be on the ball and be in that sort of frame of mind for the show.
100%. I mean, forgive me, I can't remember exactly how many days we shot for, but I want to say so close to between 105 and 110 days of shooting, maybe a little bit more, but let's just say 110, because we started first week of November and we went through literally the last day of April, like the day the rider strike happened over here in America. That's when we wrapped in Thailand, and that's when we finished the pilot. So it's a lot of days of shooting, and you can imagine he was in pretty much all of that. So you know, it was a big task and a big workload for him, but I think he did a stellar job, and he's a lovely, lovely human being. Lovely human being. I've met him a couple of times. Good guy.
No, that's good to hear. I think it's always nice to hear when you have people because they're always in the limelight. It's good to always hear that they're like nice people, and even though you like them more, but there's like a certain quality, kind of not. maybe punch in the air, sort of like, yeah, I'm glad that he's a good guy, rather than
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Well, he's
somebody's quite
Australian,
rude.
so I mean, being a Brit, I mean, if we start talking about cricket, then maybe he's not as nice, And given that the T20 cricket World Cup's on right now, so I don't know. Let's tone it down a little bit. Let's give him a little bit, but not too much.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But let's go back to the beginning. How did the project come about, and what made you want to take it on?
So I read about the project probably about 16 months before it actually went into production. So I read about it. I was in touch with, I have a relationship with HBO. So I reached out to Jenna and Jack Schuster at HBO. They were like, great, we'll keep you updated, etc. And then, a year later, the project really started to get some traction. There was, Director Park was scouting, etc. So then I met with all the producers sometime in the summer of 2022. Then I met with the showrunner, and then finally I was shortlisted to sit and talk to Director Park. And yeah, after my interview, 20 minutes later, I got the call that he wanted me to edit the series. So yeah, and I mean, it's Park Chan-wook. What else can you say? He's a master and just fantastic to work with. Really a true collaborator.
So that's pretty impressive that after 20 minutes that you got the call back to say, yeah, let's go with you. But there's also the sort of build up to that process of the first meeting as well, because I guess as like when you work in an industry where it's quite competitive, you also have to make your own luck by sometimes knowing people, but then also sometimes just popping up at the right time when contacting people. It's crazy how much timing plays a part in your life when things kind of come together. But I guess as well as you said, when you're talking about working with Director Park as well, I don't think you could ever say no to that. Director of Old
No,
Boy, Decision to
yeah.
Leave.
Exactly. And I think the moment it was announced, in 2021, I was like, I admired Director Park's work for 2 decades. I was like, that's the project. If that's my next project after Ozark, I'm going to be very, very happy. And I had my eye on that project. And I'm grateful to several people, first and foremost to HBO, for, keeping me on Director Park's radar. Initially it was going to be, but, there was talks about it. Maybe he's going to use editors in Europe because he did a project there, etc., etc. But it all pivoted and it worked out good. I'd finished with Ozark. I was doing a recut for a studio and the timing was great. In the process of interviewing, it was longer than normal. It took, 2.5 months. There's multiple steps. And, I met with Director Park, as I said. And, I didn't know actually Director Park. I cut the pilot of Snowpiercer that Scott Derrickson directed. And I didn't know that Director Park was actually an exec producer on that project. So 20 minutes of my conversation, Director Park and I talked for about 50 minutes, and 20 minutes of it was he was asking about Snowpiercer, which was really interesting. I kept asking him, I'm like, oh, why are you I mean, specifically, why are you looking at my resume and asking me about Snowpiercer? And he goes, oh, I was an exec producer on it, and I didn't, which I didn't know, which was really interesting. So we talked about that, and we just got on. It was he had his translator, Jehan, who was our translator for the entire series. It was a great conversation initially, and I was actually texting with him yesterday as well. So we're still in touch.
Again, when you have those meetings, it just sounds very relaxed. It's not about someone grilling you about how you would cut certain things or how you do this. It's just more of a let's see if we vibe and then we can get along if we have to sit like 12 hours a day with one another.
Exactly. I think it's more about building some trust, which I said to Director Park, and I assured him that I was going to be a partner in this project with him, and yeah, it was good, and it was challenging because we didn't know that Director Park was going to work. Part of the project was going to be remote, so they shot from basically November through till March, all in Los Angeles, and then they went to Asia to shoot the pilot and parts of episode 7. But then Director Park come the tail end of April, he flew back to Korea, and then that's where he remained all the way through till January. So I worked, and the other editor worked remotely with Director Park from Korea. So our days were not ideal. We're starting our days at 4 to 5 p.m. LA time and working till, anywhere between 10:30 till 1 a.m. basically.
Well, well,
Yeah. Challenge.
well, I guess as well, like mentally and physically, that your body thinking that you kind of have to sort of get into that sort of split slash night shoot sort of mode of editing with the time zones. So that must have really sort of messed with your mind a little bit, because even though you're starting later, you're still finishing quite early in the morning.
Right. And then, the challenge is, so the evening work was, you do hit a roadblock. At a certain point, come around 10 o'clock, you're just, you're exhausted. I have 2 little kids at home. So, you push through, and Director Park was very, very much aware of that. So we would try wrap it up, consistently try wrap it up before 11. But there were days it would go longer. And then the challenge was the next day before I started with him in the evening would be to try implement any thoughts he may have had that evening and clean up, etc. So it was just trying to create a working schedule that worked for the home life and for the brain power that, to be able to offer something creative. So I managed to, the first week was challenging, but then I kind of figured out my system, how I was going to work and get through the next several months. And yeah, it worked out. It was fine. And again, just I thoroughly enjoyed my collaboration with Director Park. He's he's the kind of filmmaker that values your opinion and really wants to know your opinion and wants you to offer any creative solutions, ideas. It's all freely. We worked extremely freely like that, and he loves to experiment just like I do. So it was a match made in heaven.
I think as well, like as a director, if you're the good directors, you're always going to need that collaboration, and you need to really be open about people's ideas, because you could be thinking one way while somebody else thinks another way, and sometimes one way will be great, and then another way it'll be good as well. And I think you notice that with some of the best directors, because I think somebody like Martin Scorsese, somebody pointed out to me that he never has a film filmed by Martin Scorsese, or like is a Martin Scorsese joint, because he knows that it's all such a collaborative effort between everybody to get something made.
Right. I mean, it takes a village. Yeah. Director Park, he may have imagined a scene or a sequence a very specific way. And he was, even though he may see it that way, then he would look at, say, a version that I cut potentially, and then we would work from it could end up being a hybrid, it could be my version, it could be his version. It doesn't matter. It's the best version for the episode, it's the best version for the series. So and he's cognizant of that, which is great. And I think that, egos are left out the room, and we're trying to tell the best story.
Yeah, and that's the best way to sort of go about it. For a show like this, where do you begin in your research? Do you ever look at specific films that tackle the themes of the show, or do you ever watch any historical documentaries, because it is set Vietnam War backdrop?
No, I did not. For this project I didn't actually, and I deliberately didn't read the novel. The North Star for me was the scripts. So I read the scripts. I had a lot of conversations with Director Park, tonally, music, etc. What aesthetically, what he was thinking about and going for. So, and I watched his movies. So I rewatched Old Boy. I watched Decision to Leave. I watched Handmaiden, Stoker, just to get a sense of rhythmically what he was doing, etc. But they're all different. So again, I try not to go into a project with a preconceived notion of how I'm going to put it together. I prefer to react to the film, and that's how I built every one of my scenes, and that's how I built the episodes. I just kind of reacted to it. He gave me ideas in terms of needle drops and music, temp score. So I curated a bunch of that stuff and tried it and tracked it, and some of it stuck, and some of it we augmented. But it was good. It was good. It was a good exercise in terms of finding tonally what the score was going to be. The 70s specific. Genre. We tempt a lot with Get Carter. A lot of 70s, not black exploration, but the groovy 70s stuff. It was kind of neat. It was fun.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I guess in like a research point for like an editor, you don't want to sort of taint what you have in your mind and what you've done with the breaking down of the script and also the dailies that you'd receive. Because it's the same with like if the show was based on a video game, you would want to watch how the video game plays out because then that will that will really sort of mess with your mind of how you're going to cut it because you don't want to do like a direct copy of how things flow. So, for example, in the book, if it flowed in a certain way or how information is presented as well.
Yeah, and I think it's the same philosophy in terms of it's nice not to be on set. It's fun to go to set, but it's nice not to be present for too long because I don't want to have any baggage of, oh, that one setup took them 7 hours to shoot and it's complicated, etc. And it does these great moves, but it does when you step back and you watch it, you're like, actually, we don't need that. Like we as a viewer, I don't think the viewer's gonna want that. This is where the story starts here, and I want to start here. So I don't have by not going to set, I don't have that, the baggage there. And I think it's the same thing that you're articulating, which is yeah, I think it's good not to have a preconceived notion of how to go into something and just be reactive.
Yes, and there's also like as an editor, because you've been an editor for so long, like you're gonna trust your instincts of like where to cut it, how if you're gonna leave it on a shot for that extra second or not. Especially with a show like this where it is one of the sort of things is espionage, so you kind of want to cut it in a way that you see like actors reacting to certain news and information that's being provided to see if they already know if the information is being given to them or if it's new information.
Correct. Correct. And there's a lot going on. The captain's got two faces, basically. He's playing the South Vietnamese, but he's also playing the communist spy. So it's those secret looks. It's those, it's it's playing with the audience in a very, very delicate way. And I think you just got to be aware of that. And again, it was really important. And I think for me, it was valuable that I actually did not read the novel because I didn't want to have something in my mind. I'm like, oh, this happened in the book, but on the page it's this, or the script's doing this, etc., etc. I'm just reacting to the scripts and then the material that was presented to me. So because I don't have the book, I don't have the novel to react to. That's not what we're making. It's an adaptation, and but I do believe it's very, very close to the book, and I think I think with a little bit of distance, maybe I'll read the novel one day. But right now, I'm okay to take a break. I think sympathize. 18 months on Sympathizer was I think I need a little time off.
Yeah, you need to unsympathize yourself.
Exactly.
What I'm curious to know about as well in the show, because as an audience, we follow the captain, and we're always through his point of view, and we're kind of seeing the world through his point of view and his consciousness. As an editor, how do you go about cutting a show where it is primarily through one person's point of view as they experience the world and the sort of turmoil they are going through?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think. I'm conscious of it, but I definitely favor a lot of strong point of view cutting, so it's a lot of the captain absorbing the dialogue that's being said by the other actors. It's all on him. What's he thinking? What's he doing? Just kind of reacting to some of the other lines. And I think we know this whole story is the captain's point of view. It's very clear right from the get-go. We start in the re-education camp, and he's telling us a false confession. It's not the perfect confession, but he's telling us the false confession. So we know immediately the voiceover we hear that it's the captain, and that's the journey we're gonna take with the captain. So every scene, even though we're not in a close-up, it's still even though we're in potentially a wide shot, we know it's still the captain's point of view. And Director Park did a fantastic job of blocking and helping the audience with engaging with the captain's point of view, even though, again, we're sometimes not so tight with him, that's the pedestrian way of doing it, I believe. I think Director Park's sophisticated taste was it kind of doesn't matter. We just automatically are aware that this story is being told.
Yeah, and we're thrown into that world, and especially when he's in the re-education camp, because as an audience, you're kind of like, "Well, what's going on?" And then when you're going back to the beginning of the story, then it's kind of you're getting that point, that like that different point of view of like this is how it all went down, and this is what it means to me. I quite like those sort of stories as well, because in a way you kind of you grow more to to like the characters, because you're even though you're getting one point of view of what other people think of other characters. So for example, like the way that he looks after Bon after episode one because of what's happened to his family, you get so many sort of different feelings and sympathies that sort of invoke you as an audience member as well. Because it's the same with, in a bad way, like somebody like Sunny, for example, who you kind of get like because of the captain's feelings towards him and what they think of Sunny, you kind of start feeling like that towards him as well.
Right.
And you, in a way, because it just seems like that sort of young punk kid who's into his ideologies and is looking for like his identity. So I've even now saying that out loud, I feel bad for like disliking Sunny when really he's just somebody that we know you could have known from growing up, who probably reads a few ideology books and is like finding his way in the world.
Correct. I mean, I think you said it really well there. Yeah, like Sonny's a nice guy, but whatever. He's kind of he's annoying as a character, right? He just and I think we see that the captain sees that, and we engage with the captain by then, So and then he steals his love interest as well. So it's kind of like you we despise him as well, as much as the captain despises him, and I think it's which only cements our like for the captain even more in a strange way. I think, because we're tracking with the captain and his point of view, and he's the character that we are following. So when Sonny shows up and he's just got that cackle of a laugh in it's episode two, I think, when we're introduced to Sonny in the liquor store, and they're kind of going, at each other a little bit, and he's just kind of like he's got this just vile laugh, and it's and Director Park just played with that even more. We kind of just made it feel really annoying, which it actually is. And he did a great job. The actor who plays Sonny did a fantastic job of representing that character too. So. And I think truthfully, I think all the Vietnamese cast did such I'm blanking on the word, but they did such a great job of really bringing this Vietnamese story to life. And I think it was I hope as filmmakers and I hope being not Vietnamese, I hope we did good by that, and I hope I did good by that. So because it's 90 probably 95% of the cast is Vietnamese for the first time in a project.
Yes, and I guess when it comes with stuff like that, as the creatives involved in it, you want to be respectful to their culture and how they're being portrayed as well, which is very important. Just because, especially like the 70s as well, where you even see it with like how the racism's like towards the Vietnamese when they come over. So when they're at
Fort
the
Shafi and
yeah, when they're at Congressman's house and
that's right.
they use a racial slur to say, why is this person here?
Yeah.
Or even in episode 2 where they have the spray painting
Hmm.
of the famous spy being shot,
That's right.
um,
Butcher. Yeah. Hmm.
which again is like amazing to use those real life images for a show like this.
Hmm.
And like the sort of things that probably go through the captain's mind when he sees something like that and the anxiety that could be created.
Yeah, I mean, I think he didn't shy. I think very deliberately, does Director Park and Don didn't shy away from what was specific and what people went through in the 70s. They owned the racism, and I mean, that's how the 70s was in the 80s as well. I mean, look, I grew up in England, northwest of England, and was subjected to a large amount of racism, just being a person of color. And I think that's just, and in the show, they embrace is not the right word, but they kind of just like own it. And the stereotypes are true, and it's it's that's what they did, and that's how they talked, and they didn't shy away from that. So and that's all director Park and Don. They wrote those scripts, and yeah, it was they make you laugh out loud, but when you think about it, it's actually really racist, what they're saying. But that's what happened in the 70s and 80s, and truthfully, it's what's happening right now, right? So it's still prevalent.
Yes, and it's I know what you mean in terms of like it make you laugh out loud, but I think then you kind of take a step back from that laughing to be like, oh, hang on a minute, that is not correct. That is not right.
Correct.
And it's not
Correct.
necessarily when people to say, oh, politically correct or this, that, the other. It's just like it's just not correct because I think some when people use it, it's like they don't use it as a jokey manner. It's like it's got a lot of venom towards those sort of words.
That's right. That's right.
You did pick up a point about the sort of like racism and identity, but I've got a question for that. But I'm going to save that to the end because I feel like we could get really deep on that, but I would like to save it for the end from that bit. But going back to editing, because you're editing episodes 1, 2, and 5, and then you also did some addition, you're also an additional editor on episodes,
Three. I did. Yeah,
episode
additional editing.
on episode 3. Thank you. Do you feel that sometimes when because your episodes span over both Vietnam and America, do you feel that you should be cutting it in a certain way when you're in different countries, or does that something like that does not factor into it?
No, that truthfully did not factor into it. We shot out of order. So episodes 2 and 3, the first episodes that were shot. So I did look at 1 and 2 as two different pilots. I will say that. I looked at one as the Asian pilot and two as the American pilot. It's the road trip. Number 2 was episode 2 is the road trip across America, laying the pipe for America. One was setting up Asia, setting up, that story. But in terms of cutting and style, no, not at all. I just, you want it to feel that it was deliberate, that it's all cut from the same cloth. It all feels the same, it all feels as a whole. And I think that's the goal.
Okay, I always thought that might play a certain factor into it, just because you'd have the glitz and glamour of America, but then also the sort of the war setting of Vietnam.
Right.
But I was wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely more needle drops in episode 2. When we come to America, 1 has a little bit of it, but that's why Director Park directed the first 3. He really was setting the template and the aesthetic of the first 3. And yeah, no, there was not. I mean, I don't remember specifically if we did anything or if I did anything differently. I did not. I mean, again, I just trust my instinct, to trust my gut, and then I kind of run with it from there. And I wasn't thinking, oh, episode 1 stylistically, I should do this, and episode 2, I didn't. That was just not on my radar.
Fair enough. I think there's there are some in this episodes that you cut. There's some scenes that I'd love to talk about. In the first episode, there's a really cool transition of when they're on the phone, where the old school phones where you have to do the dial for each
Mhm.
number, and then transitions, I think, to a bus. How difficult is something like that to edit and transition to make it look like smooth and super cool?
So the transition is actually from the rotary phone in the special police headquarters, and it goes to the car with the captain sitting in the back wheel, where we've revealed a communist spy on the street. So that's the transition I believe you're talking about. It actually isn't difficult to edit because Director Part designed it. So the challenge was making the lowrider needle drop work. So I had it in sync at the start where I wanted the needle drop to start, and then I know where he hums along and he sings when he's following the communist spy, that has to be in sync. So it's everything in between that I have to try and make work, timing wise, etc. And then the futz comes on as if we're hearing it from the car radio, and then we come back out full again. So yes, it's integral, but the actual conceptually the design of it was all Director Park. And VFX helped us stabilize the wheel to match the wheel a little bit, but it was always very, very much designed by Director Park.
Okay, cool. Because as visually as audience members, when I saw that, I was just like quite blown away because it looked so cool. It was
Yeah.
just amazing. But then also adding everywhere else's sort of VFX elements and the music as well, which again, cutting to music must be quite difficult because it's getting the right tempo to, do you hit it on this beat? Do you hit it on that beat? Is it going to work on this one?
Right. Yeah, and then it's like, so you have that, Director Park's very much a master of transitions. That's something that he thinks about a lot, and it's they're always additive to the story, and the thing that we had fun with, and definitely what I had a lot of fun with, was the rewind effect. So, on the page, it's just like the images rewind, and you're like, well, how? So I came up with concepts of that, and what you see is what we did, and initially I had still frames, and then it was like we made them come to life, and then they would rewind at different speeds. Each one is different, and it tells a story. If you were to pause them and go really slowly, you'd see images from the show, and you come back, et cetera, et cetera. So they do change in speed, and they give away stuff that we've not seen yet over the course of the series. And there's a few in one. There's a few in. I think there's one or two in episode two. I know there's one in three, and there's definitely some in five too. So it's a great tool to be able to remind the audience that this is the captain's train of thought. That in his forced confession, he is trying to recollect his memory to try write down the narrative for the commander that he's being interrogated by.
It's such a good way as well of like kind of seeing how you can maybe, if you look into it more, like how somebody's mind is working and how you'll sort of jump when he's, because he's writing the confession out so many times, where he has to sort of jump between days and what his memories are of what happened. And as a spy, he might be writing something that's a lie or it could be the truth. We don't ever necessarily know.
Correct. Yeah, we don't, right? And we're believing whatever he's saying to us, but then you realize, wait, you missed that last time. So is he telling the truth? Is he holding off on information? And we don't know. I mean, which is great. I mean, it's a great, and then we've got the visual tool to help support that too.
Yes, and I think we see that in episode 5 more, where there's a lot of jumping in the scenes from place to place to then be like, well, hang on a second, you missed 2 days out here. What happened here? So
That's
it's
right.
like, let's rewind back.
Exactly. Yeah, he just ends up at Fantasia, and you're like, wait, you've missed all this out. We got to go back again, and let's go back to how did you get the tickets to Fantasia? What happened out, after the hospital, etc. And then we come to Fantasia. He just skipped literally, I don't know, whatever, however many, a week, let's say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun to play with. It's fun to do that. And it's even more interesting to do when it's not on the page to try help cement that even more.
Yeah, and I think when you have, obviously you have like, it's like the way I think about it is like the script is the puzzle, But when you get the footage, it's like everything's sort of jumbled up. So then you kind of have to put the puzzle back together. And especially with how things might be written, it's different to like visually to like the directions, the actions of what's written will be different to what you might be see visually because you don't see you can't read how an actor's going to react to that scene.
Correct, correct, yeah. And it's, you just gotta be fluid all the time. Once you watch the dailies, you again, as editors, I think we react. We have to react to what's being presented. And if something moves you, you very quickly remember that. It made you feel something. So you put that away and you're like, that I love that moment. I like that could be that's a nugget that I want to kind of keep, and I want to build this little moment around this little piece here because it made me feel this. And then you'll have a collection of those, and then the scene comes together, and you're like, wow, I was able to put all these pieces together. And then you step back and you watch, and you're like, you know what? I have to actually sacrifice a couple of these because it doesn't feel as a piece. They're great, but it doesn't work for his character to be, kind of on this roller coaster of a performance. It doesn't feel whole. And I think then you pare it back or you add more to it or whatever it is, but I think you're constantly working and reworking material as an editor.
Yeah, which it's like a which I think is quite fun knowing that you can probably go back and rework on things to make it fit for the whole scene, episode, and so on. But then also going back to episode 5 and talking about the Fantasia and that whole scene, because it's a really nice way of like the captain integrating back into his life until he kind of gets snapped out of it with
When
Man.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And when Mon sort of kind of appears and he's like, oh, drinking champagne, this, that, the other, and making the different sounds. That was probably one of my favorite scenes of the show, just because of the way it's stylized, the performances, but then also it's the way it's edited as well. How do you go about editing that sort of scene where you're taking a person out of their surroundings and into, I guess, deeper into their subconsciousness?
I'm glad. Well, it's interesting you asked that question because I had a lot of fun with that scene. That's the scene where I wanted it to I wanted it to feel different than the rest of the episode, the rest of the series. So it was cut very deliberately, differently. I had a lot of fun with sound and dropping out sound, and actually played the I think it's the Lady Marmalade, the Vietnamese version backwards. You kind of went, you can go a little bit nuclear with that. And my hope was for the audience to feel like the air's been sucked out and we're living in a bubble for a second. And then at the end of that sequence, when Lana comes off stage and she kind of like surprises him, he drops the champagne glass, and then we're back to reality again. So I wanted it to feel not jarring, but I wanted, to feel like it lived on its own island and kind of uncomfortable in a weird way. And you're really in his point of view. The hope was that you would be really in the captain's point of view because we're using sound to help us, but also just the way it's put together. That it's not cut like the rest of the episode. That specific scene is different.
Yes, and I feel like as an audience member, you're kind of taken back into a world of like don't forget what you're supposed to be doing, especially when you're kind of gallivanting on a film set rather than actually sticking to your plan and your
That's
mission.
right. And your mission, yeah, it's a good reminder that he's got a mission to do, and he's maybe getting a little too comfortable. So it's a good jolt and a reminder for him, like, oh, what's good. Oh, you haven't checked in because he hasn't checked in with Mun by then, and I think it's a good reminder for the audience that oh, he's got a task. There's a task here for him. So let's get back to business again. And after that, we see that he gets back to business.
Yeah, and he gets back onto it, and especially
Yeah,
when you find out what the general's up to and
yeah.
whatnot.
The general's army at the end, and the general, what a character the general is. Is just like the first ever scene I cut of the general was in episode 2 where he's drunk and he's on the porch, and he pulls out the gun, when he's drunk on the captain, because it's like he's this larger than life character. He's kind of like your uncle in many ways. It's just like I kept saying to Director Pack, he feels like an uncle, and also all of a sudden he's so unhinged that he's drunk, but he could split. He can change very very quickly and become this dark menacing character. And I think I thoroughly enjoyed editing the actor that plays the general. I think he did a really, really good job, and I suspect he's a fan favorite.
There's so many sort of different feelings that I have for the general because it's like you're the general of the secret police, but you don't know what's right in front of you, which kind of like makes me laugh in a way. But then also on top of that, it's just the way that he behaves and it's sort of like he's still in love with his rank and still
That's right.
think it carries some meaning, but at the same time, it's like you started a new life somewhere else, and it's kind of like he finds it very difficult to let go.
That's right. Yeah, he's holding on to his homeland. I mean, he's holding on to who he is, and it's difficult for him to let go. And yeah, and he opens his, that's why the liquor store's there and all the rest, and everything else that happens. He's an interesting character, and it was definitely fun to play with him. I think it's I truthfully really enjoyed him as a character.
I think as well, like there's parts where he's also unintentionally funny, so you're not sure if you should laugh, but because he's a person in power as being like a general, you kind of want to laugh, but you don't want to laugh because you know that there'll be some sort of repercussions from what's happening.
Right. I mean, there's so many great moments. I mean, episode 5 has some wonderful scenes with him, specifically in the, Madame Fuzz restaurant in the back room where he's talking to the captain, and he's kind of tearful about Lana, and then all of a sudden he just like performance there, he starts like he makes these sounds, and his performance is so laughable, yeah, in a good way. And then there's obviously the wonderful moment in the latrine in episode 2, where all the flies are flying around and he's squatting the flies, and when they leave the mess hall, and then outside the liquor store where he's like, "Oh, those women in the for traffic threw a slipper at me," and he does the gesture, and it's those moments, they go a long way. Those little moments of the general. And he's
Yeah,
got his missing toe as well, which is just gross. Yeah, on top of it all.
yeah, exactly. And obviously, like it's just the way that he sort of portrays it, especially throughout the show, is that like the only time he kind of shows it is when he wants to show his vulnerability and vulnerable side, which feels like a sort of like a what's the word? Like in an interesting way to portray that as a character that he'll show like something that's been disfigured as like his vulnerable side and that he's kind of comfortable with you as
Comfortable with
well.
it. Yeah, exactly. So there's obviously some trust there, and they have that relationship, the captain and the general, obviously. So yeah, it's a good way to kind of take that cue of, oh, there's a bond between these two people.
Mm. What I'm curious to know about as well is like the VFX elements in the show. As an editor, how do you go about editing scenes that rely heavily on VFX elements? Do you cut it in a certain way, trying to consider what's there on the screen, or does the editing change a little bit once the VFX elements have been added in?
Bit of both. Good question. Bit of both. Constant communication with our VFX supervisor, who was Chad One Street on this project. Specifically the big set piece of the entire series was actually the tarmac sequence in the pilot, where they're fleeing Saigon, the fall of Saigon, and Director Park, myself, and Ji Young, and obviously with Chad, we had done a pretty good animatic of that sequence, and we were working on that, I think around November, December time, eh, because in preparation for when they were going to go to Thailand to shoot that sequence. So we worked on it. Do we need this shot? What do we need, etc. And we kept building it. We scored it, we put sound effects in it, we had temp dialogue with Julian, my assistant, and Victoria. They both did, they helped do all that. And then when all the material comes in, I'm having conversations. I've got the storyboards, but also we still have to tell the story. So I try to stay close to the storyboards. I also have the animatic, but I'm pivoting from there to try to tell the story in a dramatic way, communicating with Chad. I'm like, what's the intent here? What's the idea here? Because this is a little bit off the storyboard. And then he would articulate to me. I'm like, got it. So, and then once we would get very early versions of VFX in, I would then with him initially go through it, and then maybe I'll start making some trims. Obviously, we direct apart, we'd start trimming, etc. Even sometimes opening stuff up because we're like, we have to account for the helicopter to drop, etc. So it's a constant communication between Chad and I, his team, and also with Director Park.
And I guess also like subconsciously, as you said, like with something like the helicopters dropping in or this happening, subconsciously in your mind, you have to sort of imagine it being there whilst you're cutting so that there's a pace to the scene, or if you hold on to a scene a little bit longer as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely utilize, even in its crudest fashion, any work that my assistants can do. So, for example, the bus tipping over, I had Julian, my assistant, just temp a bus in there, just a box with, two wheels, and we had it flip over just to help with timing. And then you put the sound in there, so you're like, oh, I've got the timing pretty good now. Like it may need to be on for a second longer, 2 seconds longer, but it's not 10 seconds short. I get the sense of it. I need that to be able to then move on to the next moment of the sequence. And that's how I built that whole tarmac sequence. And it was, I think I want to say they spent about 4.5, 5 days shooting that entire sequence. The end of 101 and the top of 102. So yeah, it's challenging, all night shoot for them, and then a lot of VFX help for us as well on the back end here.
Yeah, and again, doing those night shoots with those sort of big explosions, VFX elements, and then also the emotional nature of the scene as well. It probably was quite taxing on the crew.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought up the word emotion. I think we can't just have it be an action set piece. It has to serve the story. It has to have some emotion in there, and it's naturally in this sequence because we know you as a viewer. I think you feel what's coming. It's that tarmac sequence. You know what's going to happen. Are they going to make it to that plane? All hell is going to break loose. You just know that. You just don't know that Bon and Lynn are going to die. And that, not Bon, Lynn and Duke are going to die in that moment, And then there's that emotional moment when Captain runs over, and then is he going to make it? But is he going to go back to the plane? Or is he going to wait with his friend? Or what's he going to do? And that dilemma, and by hard cutting out of that and going back to the re-education camp was very powerful as well. But it's just trying to elevate that emotion, I think, was key in that sequence because you're tracking with Captain and Bond. You just spend so much time with them, and then they're behind the little bunker and they run, and it's wonderful the way director Park and Gian shot it. It's like it's all a big Warner tracking along, and then they get lost. They just get left behind, and then we're in the captain's point of view so much there. He turns around and he's like, he can't find his friends. Where are they? So you feel hopefully that tension there and the drama and the chaos of that situation.
Yes, and there's so much going on that it's not that it's difficult to follow, it's just you're sort of caught up in the craziness of it all. It's like are you gonna make it? Are they not gonna make it? What's gonna happen? Where's my friends? Where's this? It's like the disorientation of the scene as well. And you kind of like, yeah, you are on the edge of your seat about what's gonna happen. Granted, I don't think you think the captain's gonna die because there's still six more episodes afterwards. But when they kill off Bond's family, that's just like it's the one thing that I think I noticed most is that it's when the baby stops crying, that's when you're like, oh man, no, like I can't believe they just did that.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you brought that up because I was so conscious of that. Like that's the one thing I said to Director Park as well. Like it's haunting. I go, we really got to keep this baby alive with the crying, specifically on the tarmac when some of those strikes happen and the baby crying pierces through, because the moment it's gone, it's going to be harrowing. And I'm glad you called that because that was the goal and that was the intent. And when it disappears, you're like it hurts. It's extremely sad, you know.
You just know at that moment it's not good, and that's the sort of like most sort of was quite distressing as an audience member to watch and hear and view. I've got a few more questions that I'd like to ask before we wrap up. One of them is, what was your favorite scene that you didn't edit?
Favorite scene that I didn't edit. Let me see. I really like in episode 3, there's a scene between once Bond and Captain come to scout out where they're gonna kill Crap Major, and then we go upstairs to Crap Major's mother's apartment, and she's offering the biscuits. That scene, I mean, when I watched that scene for the first time, it really made me laugh. I think she's just a fantastic actress, and you can feel the anxiety between Captain and Bond. Wait, where the grandma's here? She's inviting us to the longevity party. She's offering us biscuits, and all we're thinking about is how are we going to kill Crap Major? And did she hear any of our conversation that we had? Because she just surprised us downstairs underneath the carport. And I thought that scene was really, really effective for me. And they're talking about black pudding, or I think it's black pudding. She keeps referencing, I mean, just the way she said it made me laugh a lot.
Yes, I forgot about the black pudding part, which made me sort of laugh because if you don't know what it is and you try to describe it to someone,
That's
it's
right.
yeah, it's it's quite a ooh, people eat that.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of scenes. 3 has some great scenes in there. 4 is just a complete different episode. Stylistically, it's different director, different editor, just, put together in a really different way. Works for that episode because it's a movie within a movie. So yeah. But yeah, I think there are many scenes that I could probably reference, but I remember that one because I had a really really good fun reaction to it, and she made me laugh. She truly made me laugh. So kudos to Jin who edited that scene in episode 3.
There was I have had another question that's popped into my mind. I hope you don't mind me asking. Because there are a number of editors on the show itself, are there ever conversations about how you guys should have the same sort of, not necessarily style, but create a continuity between the episodes so that there's a clear through line for the story?
No, we didn't. Truthfully, we didn't do that. I think Director Park had specific thoughts and notes which he would share with Jin and I because we were doing the lion's share of the episodes. And I think me coming in to look at episode 3 was with fresh eyes and kind of helping a little bit of aesthetically what we did with 1 and 2, and kind of making it feel a little bit more like 1 and 2 aesthetically, because same director, same editor, and then I just kind of helped that shepherd that along, just to give it fresh eyes, etc. So but yeah, no, not I mean, it's challenging. It's a really great question, and I often wonder, like, is it going to be cut differently? Which it is. It just happens. That's what happens. We all have different tastes and styles, But my role was not of a so-called quote unquote supervising editor, etc. It wasn't that. So I think when there's that position, the producer sometimes may lean on that person to say, hey, maybe it's worth you either sitting in the room with the editor or doing a little bit of a wash on the entire series, just making sure that it feels consistent. as if one director, one editor has cut all episodes, you know. So yeah, and I know it's something that I'm kind of going into on on my next project with Jason. So where I'm not, I'm not actually doing that role, but I know that's the hope.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's always just sort of interesting to hear how, if you have multiple editors, what the through line, how you get to the through line, but then also not losing your sort of take on the edit and also spin, because it then sort of becomes like not paint by numbers, but you just sort of become like a another cog in the machine rather than adding your own creativity and your own sort of signature style at the same time.
100%. I mean, I think, you know, I think being creative, I think we all have to bring something to the table. So, you know, I think it's primarily, I think it's the job of the showrunners, director Park and Don, to be, you know what, that's okay if that's different there. It's fine. Like but it still it feels as a whole, and I think that's the ultimate goal. So, because yeah, like I look at the world differently than yourself and Jane and whoever else. I mean, I think that's what we all bring to the creative industry, and our, you know, our taste and ideas are all different. But I think collectively, long as we heighten the filmmaking and storytelling and and we add to that, then that's the best of that's the best that anybody can ask for, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you have like when you work in such a creative medium, and how much can be said and what you want to bring to it and what you can add to the whole project, even for this one or your next one or your previous ones. And there's also that's your voice that you want to give to the project as well.
That's right, exactly. And I think you know, and it's the same with episodic directing. It's the same, you know, Director Park did not direct all seven of these episodes. Yeah, he just did the first three, and then you got Fernando Morales, and then you've got Mark Munden, and they all have different. It's a different aesthetic for all the other four episodes. But I think what holds it together is the nature of the storytelling still told in the same way. It's a forced confession, etc. You know, the writing's the same, the performances should be feel very much the same. It's just visually there's some different sauce added here and there, and it feels different, you know. But hopefully, it doesn't stand out. Hopefully, it feels like you are still invested, and as an audience, you enjoyed it, and it feels like you're in for the ride, and it feels part of a almost like a large movie.
Yeah, exactly. And especially with HBO shows, I know it's TV, but they do feel like 7 hour films rather than 1 hour episodic TV shows. Just to hit with my penultimate question, what was your favorite scene to edit?
My favorite scene to edit, I would probably say there's two. I would say the tarmac sequence was really challenging and very emotional to make that work correctly. I think, you know, I think it was, and I wanted it to feel real, raw. I wanted to take the audience into the point of view of the captain, so on the ground level. And I think that was a challenge. And I think you've caught some things that were really important to me, like the baby crying, etc., to give you that emotional impact. So there's that sequence, and then the other scene which I really loved putting together was there's the sequence, the beer garden at night, where in the pilot episode where basically Bond is fighting in the background and Captain and Mun are having this intimate conversation, and basically Mun says to Captain, you need to follow and you need to go to America and keep an eye on the general, and just the weight of those words landing on the captain and the emotional reaction from him was pretty powerful. And I really enjoyed, you know, cutting that sequence and the nuance of that sequence.
Solid choices, solid choices. I think the one with the beer garden scene again is probably down to the blocking as well, but the editing, like where you have Bond having a fight in the background whilst they're sort of talking shop without anyone realizing.
Yeah.
Um, And there's also the like capturing that reaction of going back again whilst thinking the mission's over. It's like, no, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a delicate dance, right? It's like you want to play into the humor with Bond fighting in the background, but there's some really important, heavy story going on here right in the front. So it's making those choices of when to step out and see Bond fighting in the background, but then get to go back in and be intimate. Yeah, it was a challenge, and then just landing the weight of the request, or the mandate from Munn to captain saying you're going, like there's no choice, you don't have a choice, you're getting on that plane with him and you're going to follow, and then just he was fantastic, his reaction was fantastic. So yeah, and the Tarmac sequence, that's it's just a challenge in the scope of it, but there are other sequences which I love, like even in five, some of the Fantasia stuff was brilliant. The big conversation between Captain Sunny and Miss Mori at her apartment. Again, that was a big sequence to put together. All dialogue heavy sequence.
And again, masterfully cut,
Thank
I
you.
should say.
Appreciate that.
No, thank you. We appreciate the show. My last question with the sympathizer, sort of like I know there's like a tug of war of what like duality of identity is, and like how we kind of see our identity and like what it means to us as well. And as the captain has sort of number of faces in the show, but as someone like yourself who's from the north of England and lives in America, you said I think off air 23 years. Was it 23?
23, 22 years. Yeah, 22
22
years.
years, sorry.
Yeah, no, all good.
And like as for yourself, how would you sum up your identity, self, and passion in what you do?
Uh, well, my identity is interesting, being of Indian heritage. Both parents from India, grew up in the northwest of England, me and my brother were raised in England, but then, spent almost half my life in America. So I've kind of got this really hodgepodge of an identity, really. My kids mock my British accent, even which is kind of fun, and it's great, and I love it. But yeah, like yeah, and an identity is what I do in my craft. I just feel like I like to identify myself as a filmmaker more than an editor. I feel like I contribute as a filmmaker, and I'm not just an editor. I feel like as I said to Director Park when I met with him, I go, I hope, that you look at me as your partner, and I'm going to be your partner in this. And, I'm going to be, hopefully I'm bringing stuff to the table. I'm going to elevate the script. I'm going to elevate the directing. That's my job. I'm not here to press buttons. And he appreciated that, because that's what he wants. He does not want somebody coming to press buttons. He wants somebody to bring something to the table. Like, what are your ideas here? Then let's work from there. So yeah, I'm a British Indian filmmaker. That's how I would describe myself. That's my identity, I guess. With two kids who mock my English accent.
You know what? I feel sorry for you about the kids mocking your accent.
They do. They do it all. My eldest does it all the time. He's constantly mocking me. And he's 10 and he mocks me. My little girl, she doesn't do it as much, but there's a lot of room for that. It's coming.
Um, and I feel like that's a really good way to end the episode as well. Thank you so much for your time, Vix.
I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
The Sympathizer is out now on HBO, or I think it's called Max in America. In the UK, it's on Sky Atlantic. Go out, watch Vix and his co-filmmakers work on the show. Thank you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. You take care and bye-bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.